But I want to move on to the next big fight that's coming up, which we already have some clarity on. That's DDP versus Israel Adesanya.
Great fight.
Israel Adesanya has not fought in almost a year, and the last time we saw him, he was dominated on the feet, doing what he does best by Sean Strickland. Then we saw Sean Strickland move into fighting Dricus du Plessis in his first title defense. Many folks, myself included, thought Sean won that fight.
Me too.
I'm not saying it was a robbery, but I think that Sean Strickland did enough to get his hand raised in that fight. So DDP is coming into this fight with a bit of a chip on his shoulder.
Right.
DDP is a very interesting fighter to me. He has a ton of power, clearly.
Yeah.
His grappling is very good. I have to call it how I see it. The way he strikes and the way he moves to me is a little bit awkward. It's a little bit clunky, and he is available to get hit. So I think Adesanya has a really good chance in this fight. And I think the odds makers are kind of thinking along the same lines as I'm thinking, because Izzy's actually, even though he's coming off a loss and even though we haven't seen him in a year, and DDP is on very much a hot streak right now, Izzy's still a slight favorite. It's almost a pick 'em, but Izzy is like a minus 145.
Right.
Last time I checked the odds before we started rolling the cameras today. So that's interesting to me, the fact that the odds makers do have it as a favorite for Adesanya. But I think they're kind of looking back to some of Izzy's performances against big, strong guys that hit hard, have that one-punch knockout power. Yoel Romero, phenomenal grappler. Paulo Costa. He's not the wrestler that Romero is, but he certainly has one-punch knockout power. And Izzy, those types of fighters cater right into Izzy's game.
Right.
Sean Strickland is a smother you with boxing, super high pace, excellent cardio, not giving you the space that you need to do what you need to do. So, but the other side of that coin is DDP is damn near the size of a 205er.
Yeah.
And when Izzy went up to 205 to fight Jan Blachowicz, he was outstruck. Although I think Izzy may have thrown more shots, Jan certainly landed the better shots and the more damaging shots. And he was kind of dominated in the grappling realm as well, which we know DDP has a phenomenal submission game. Yeah. So to me, this fight, and I'm going to try to devise a prediction before we finish talking about it, but I keep going back and forth on it. What are your thoughts from a technical standpoint, and do you dare to make a prediction?
I will make my prediction. I'm very excited for Izzy's return. Izzy, when the world of MMA is a better world when Izzy's competing. And look, he deserved that break. Nobody was as active of a champion as Israel Adesanya.
Not even close.
At least not in the modern era. Yeah, I'm sure you could go back to the early 2000s and find somebody who was fighting as consistently as Izzy. Yeah. But Izzy goes out there, he shows us, and look, he fought Alex Pereira, and now they've both beat each other in MMA. Alex Pereira seems like an unstoppable force right now. So you have to remember, Izzy beat him. He finished him, right? Like, this is incredible. Izzy is still absolutely, I just said a second ago, Sugar Sean's the best striker in MMA. It's 1A and 1B for Izzy, in my opinion.
And Pereira and potentially Topuria. Yeah.
Right. But like you said, with the awkward style of DDP, and I love that because Pereira very much is an awkward fighter as well. But you have to call it awkward, but you can't call it wrong, because if it's effective, then it obviously works.
It's right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's right. Even if it looks ugly, even if he's falling all over himself. If you've got a baseball player and he's a pitcher and he's really, really good, but he stands up like this and throws the ball through his legs.
Yeah.
As long as he's going through the strike zone.
If he's throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, then what can you say?
Exactly. You can't really critique the technique. So while, yes, I could sit here and poke holes in DDP's striking style, I'm only going to poke holes from a traditional striker standpoint. Like, DDP does a lot of things wrong, but they work for him, so they're just wrong optically. They actually work very well, and they're effective, and he's able to generate enough power to get the finishes that he needs to do, and if he has to take the fight to the ground, he can do that. So DDP is one of those guys that is so awkward that it probably does take a couple of rounds to really get a good read on him, and all the while you're figuring out what he's doing, he's stealing those first couple of rounds from you, because he comes out with a pretty aggressive style, and you don't want to just jump into a firefight with him because the one-punch knockout power that you you were referring to. He can put the lights out. So Izzy's a very calculated fighter. He's willing to get into a firefight. He's willing to engage in the fire with somebody. And even guys who hit harder than him or seem to be more power punchers than Izzy, he's willing to get in there, but not until he understands where the danger is when he's inside with you.
On his terms.
Right, yeah. Engage on your own terms. And he did that with Alex Pereira. He even knew exactly how to draw him in. And I could see a similar motion that out of Izzy for DDP. You know, you get somebody like Alex Pereira or DDP to think that there's blood in the water, and then they swarm you, and they're just looking to get that fight finished as quickly as possible. Israel Adesanya knows he can stay cool as a cucumber in that fire exchange and find those clean shots. And with his speed, his accuracy, and his timing, plus the defense that he's able to showcase, I think he could wind up catching DDP. And I feel like Izzy 2.0 is about to emerge out of nowhere. He's going to come back. People were talking about it's going to be 5 years till we see Izzy, and that was a little bit of trolling on his part. But I really do think that the best thing Izzy can do is get back in there. He belongs in nothing but title fights, and it makes a lot of sense to me to see DDP go out there and Izzy. I know it's not in Africa, but this could be the start of the next great trilogy for Israel Adesanya. I just feel like there's something there. And Izzy's such a good character for the sport. He knows how to really evoke emotions, not only out of the fans that are watching the story unfold, but also his opponent. He knows how to draw the reactions out of him. He was flustering DDP a bit in the ring that one night. You know, things got a little bit heated, and that's why they sort of pushed that fight along the road. But this fight to me is very interesting. And the other addition to the entire equation is the Alex Pereira, anomaly. Because yes, he's not in their division right now, but Israel Adesanya has business with Alex Pereira, and only a fool would think that we're not going to see a trilogy between those two. And if DDP loses this fight and loses his belt to Izzy, I don't think Izzy's next fight will take place at 185. I think with the dust settling and everything happening at 205 the way it is, I think they're going to need to have another star emerge. Now we've got Rakic and Magomed fighting each other, who Magomed should have been the number one contender, but clearly that's not the direction the UFC is going. And then you hear the UFC say, we're not making another fight for Alex Pereira until after we get the results of DDP versus Izzy, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. They aren't even really hiding it. We want to see the winner of that fight move up for champ status. Izzy already had one crack at that. He wasn't successful, but now he's actually got a win over the current champion. And I also think when you have DDP, who's a very big guy, like you said, probably belongs at 205. I think he was only at 185 for the beginning of his career because he saw a good path to the title. I think DDP is going to finish out his career at 205. I think it's going to be a very interesting path for DDP. If I'm going to give you my prediction, I think Izzy goes out there and cleans him up. I think he's a far better striker. I think DDP is awkward, and that does work sometimes. And when you don't see things coming or they come from awkward angles, they can catch you. But Israel is so buttoned up. He's so calculated, and he stays very calm until he has a good read on you. So I think DDP, like you said, is a perfect stylistic matchup for Izzy. I think it's actually going to be one of the easier fights for Israel Adesanya, and he's figured out how to dissect an awkward fighter like an Alex Pereira. So I think he knows exactly what he needs to do to go out there and beat DDP, get his belt back, and I think he's going to point all of his cannons right at Alex Pereira, go for the guy, go for the trilogy, go for another awkward fighter. But I guess we can say if that doesn't happen and DDP does win the fight, I would be equally interested in seeing Alex Pereira fight DDP because DDP is so awkward and Alex is so awkward that I truly don't know how that fight would go. I would assume DDP would try to take it to the ground at some point because people still seem to think that there's a pretty big hole in the game of Alex Pereira's grappling. But as the years pass by and the months pass by, he's making crazy improvements. Now he's showing footage of him training grappling, and there's a lot of technique that he's displaying, and he seems to be a pretty legit grappler. I know they gave him that black belt in the octagon for God only knows what reason, but
after a knockout.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna try to question his black belt. So I'd love to see either fight, but if you're asking me my prediction, DDP is going to get finished just like some of the other big heavy punchers that Israel's fought in his past, and I think Israel's going to go right up for that trilogy against Alex.
Interesting. And I've gone back and forth on this fight, and I'll just kind of give you my thoughts on where each of them has an advantage.
Okay.
Precision and technical striking, Adesanya.
Yeah.
Power, DDP.
Yeah.
Clearly. DDP is going to have a power advantage and a strength advantage over Adesanya. He's big. He's extremely strong.
Yeah.
People that have grappled with him have said that the way he feels on the mat, he feels like a heavyweight. He's extraordinarily powerful. He's extraordinarily strong. He does have that awkward cadence. Confidence. Israel has been one of the most confident fighters in the UFC for several years, for at least 3 years now. DDP can match him on confidence, and DDP's on a win streak. Izzy has the first of his losing streaks. Right. So I'm leaning more towards Dricus.
Really?
And I wasn't leaning that way just a couple of days ago, but I went back and I watched some of his fights. And yes, he's awkward, but he's not Romero and he's not Costa.
No.
He's more skilled as far as submissions go than both Costa and Romero.
For sure.
I believe that his top pressure jiu-jitsu, he's not the wrestler that Yoel Romero is, certainly not by a long stretch, but I believe his top pressure jiu-jitsu and his advancement, position leading to submission, gives him the highest chance of those three gentlemen to have submitted Adesanya. So, I think you have to factor in that a submission could be there. And I think that he just is going to be able to find a shot that kind of frazzles Izzy.
Yeah.
And I think that he's going to, if he's smart, go back and watch the Jan Blachowicz fight because he's got a similar, but he might even be bigger than Jan, to be honest. He's got a very similar body frame, big, strong, great grappling. If Jan can do what he did to Izzy, I believe DDP can too. So I'm going to pick DDP to win this fight by submission.
Okay.
Probably in the third or fourth round. I think, and I do think you're right. I think the first round, Izzy's going to be cerebral. It's going to be hard for Dricus to find his entries, and Izzy's probably going to win the first and second round. But, I've picked against Dricus before a couple of times, and I've been wrong. I'm not going to be on the wrong side of this one. I do think DDP gets it done. And that would kill the potential trilogy that you mentioned for Israel and DDP.
Yeah.
Because the trilogy only works if Israel wins.
Right.
If Israel loses, then he's on a 2-fight losing streak. How does he get back to the title to fight DDP again?
He's fighting a Hamzat at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to use him. Izzy's in his late 30s now, and so the 35 curse, which by the way, Bilal Muhammad just broke that curse, but it was typically for 170 and below. 185 and above does not typically suffer the same type of fates as 35 plus fighters do, and so I think if Izzy does lose to DDP, there's still some fun to be had for Adesanya. He could always try to go make a run at 205 and see what can happen there. They're probably going to throw him the Hamzats and the people like that. That's just the nature of the game.
Yeah.
Unless Hamzat beats Whitaker and then they fast track him to a title shot, which is a whole different discussion, especially after Whitaker's last fight, which we'll have to park that discussion for another podcast. Right. But, I really think that Dricus is going to get this done. And then I think he's going to call out Pereira.
Yeah.